Welcome back. As we continue the conversation around the trauma of dehumanization, we cross seemingly vast divides to connect and find the humanness in one another. We begin to discover empathy and compassion that extends far beyond community. And we talk about the urgency for those of us who are able to use our voices by sharing our stories.
I have several friends that are survivors of some pretty hefty abuse, and they have a hard time knowing what they actually like or want or need because they've been told by other people what they like or want or need. And it's really difficult for them to learn to tune into themselves and discover who they really are and who they want to be. They don't have a sense of choice. They're developing that, and to one degree or another, I myself am learning that as well. It's maybe not extreme abuse in my case, but I think it's more common than we think because of media and experiences that we've had on this planet. It's kind of easy to fall into the trap of thinking that we should be one way or another, or that we actually are. You know, if people have told us you are so many times, we may have decided that yes, I am, and that may not be the case.
So I think another example, again, unfortunately, I keep using that term today, but I mean, I don't know what else to call it. This is not the fact that we have to have these conversations.
Mm.
It's not great, you know. I wish we could talk about other things, but these are important conversations, as you said, Amy, to have. It's how we connect with each other. But another example is if we look at the events um, in other countries, right? Whether it's Sudan right now, or whether it's
Mm.
Ukraine, or whether it's Afghanistan, or wherever, right? Those conflicts, much like our own conflicts here in the United States, start and continue because other people are other people, right? They're not our neighbors anymore, and they're not the classmates of our children, or they're not our classmates from 20 or 30 years ago. They're other people now. They're those. That's the other side of the aisle. That's the other side of the spectrum. And you know, if if only we could start to refer to each other by our names, right? Because we start to identify people as people when we call them by their names. I think of my own family, for example, and I have probably less connection to a memory when I say, "Oh, my family got together." But when I say, "Oh, I remember when we got together and my brother and I,"
Mhm.
or "my brother this person," or "my brother that person," and we did this thing, that memory comes alive in me, right? The happiness is much happier, and the emotion is more present. Whereas when I just say, "Yeah, we did this family thing or whatever," it was a big deal, right? But when I remember the names with friends or other people, that humanness is back. But I don't think any of us can give the names of people in Sudan or Ukraine or Afghanistan right now. It's too much for the human brain to handle. I mean, we can't keep all these names in our head, right? But the point is, even here at home, on your street that you live on, at your job, you remember those names. And yet, dehumanization occurs there too. When we have disagreements in the workplace, for example, on how to get to a commonality, a solution, and we other people that way too. So I think that the effects of this are so far reaching, much further than just even the laws.
I do a lot of work with my in my under my auspices as a yoga and meditation teacher, and I work a lot with the addiction community and the formerly incarcerated community, and it's rife in both of those communities that it's so easy to for other people to label someone as an addict and then see them in a particular lens or see someone as a convict or a criminal or a felon or whatever, and all that does is then eliminate the rest of everything you were just talking about, Oak. These people, most of them have brothers or sisters or mothers or fathers or cousins or family people or children or loved ones. They're people, and it's there, but there's there's an ease, and I don't know if it's some sort of a evolutionary shortcut that we engage in, a societally evolved shortcut that allows us to try to size on up if someone is going to be beneficial or detrimental in our networking or our worldview or our circles. And so if we can sort of engage in a shorthand that says, okay, I look at you and I see X, Y, and Z. Okay, now I know what box to place you in my life. And and usually check off the box: beneficial to me, detrimental to me, and then I make judgments that way without really taking on in the fullness of who that person is and what their journey's been, what lessons they've learned, what lessons they can teach others, and what other benefits they can bring to their worlds around them, be it within their own families, be it within their own communities or the world around us. It's hard to say, but yeah, one of I'm a very physical person, and so I engage with my people very physically, and I go out of my way to make sure that I'm a hugger. So I hug all of my students because I know a little bit of what they've been through, and I understand what it is to feel judged or less than. And so go out of my way to make sure to let these people know that you have people around you who care about you, who see the better side of you, who have hope for you and believe in you. And to embrace those people and let them know, yeah, I see you as a person first. All the other stuff is other stuff. We can deal with all that. We can talk about that or not talk about that. But the bottom line is engaging in somebody, like you said, meeting them where they're at and helping restore their own sense of self-worth. And I think one of the things that we're talking around a little bit, but not addressing directly, is also in terms of fostering the communication, is when we see this happening, speaking up, not to let it go silently, not to let it go unsaid. I think, like Amy, you were talking about earlier, that idea that if we see the behavior or we hear the behavior, the language, and we do nothing, we're silently condoning that continued thought process, that continued behavior. And because if we don't, those that want to engage in this sort of behavior, they feel unchecked. They throw out test balloons like these legislative policies we've been seeing thrown around the country. Then they throw out these test balloons and see how they poll and see how they go. And if they don't get too much pushback, the assumption is this is fine. We can continue moving forward with this. So it's incumbent upon all of us to really, really not only foster healthy communications with people who need to be supported, but to let those decision makers know that this is not appropriate and we will not support it.
That's really fascinating. You made really good points. So our brains really do this stuff. It really is a shortcut. If you think back to, caveman days,
Hmm.
right? How are days in the early stages of human evolution, we didn't have this great prefrontal cortex all beefy like it is today, right? We were living in a much scarier environment where we may have been the apex predator, but maybe less so than today, a lot less so than today, without our nukes, guns to protect us. And so we did look at people and size them up as safe or unsafe. Do they look like me? If they look like me, they're safe. If they don't look like me, they're probably a threat. They're probably attacking or going to attack or planning to attack, right? And so we absolutely have that evolutionary history. And now we also have a prefrontal cortex that's nice and beefy and works, and we get to use that. But we have to choose to use it. We have to choose to step out of our limbic brain that's all freaking out and in our fear, and recognize that there's a bigger picture that encompasses a lot more detail than whether or not somebody looks like me or acts like me or sounds like me with me.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's too, I think, when we get stuck in the like me part, right? when we approach a new group of folks, or maybe someone else is in our peer and they look like me, they dress like me, their hair looks like me, but then they open their mouth and all of a sudden they're not me. It's a little bit jarring, right? I mean, let's just be honest. It's just, I mean, it is, and it's okay that we disagree with each other, in even though we might look like each other. When it's not okay is when we get stuck in our brains and we don't use our voice, Amy and Michael, to your points. When we don't speak up. And sometimes speaking up is something as simple as saying, actually, their pronouns are they, them. So moving on. When I went to the grocery store yesterday, like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, right? But when we don't do those things, when we don't have our words come out of our mouths, we let it go, as you were talking about earlier, Amy, about just kind of planting that seed, right? Not even realizing that we got somebody else planting in our brains these seeds that we didn't even ask for, but we're allowing that to happen. So standing up by using our voice starts in our groups, in our conversations, in our relationships with people. That's where all of this starts as far as the dehumanization piece is concerned, because if we saw people as people and we used our voice and we said, hey, I don't agree with this, or this isn't right, then these things that are happening now, right, they're not as and I'm not saying they wouldn't happen, but I think there's a far less likelihood that they would, because we'd be very vocal, right? We'd be more vocal about, this is wrong. We can't stand for this. We're all we're all on the same team because we're humans. Like, it's not pie. So get allowing someone, and I hate to say allow, but that, I mean, if it's the law, then countering that is allowing, right? Allowing someone to go to their doctor and have a conversation about their health care with their doctor that they're paying, it should be none of your business. Like, it doesn't mean you get less pie when I go see my doctor talk about my health care. But somehow, because I am less than, because I'm different than what you expected, that's okay, right? But it's got to be more than just me or one other person. It has to be other people getting that fear, getting out of our heads, acknowledging that we don't understand and this is new information and we're confused, and knowing that's okay to not understand. It's okay to not be educated on. We're not born educated on all the topics in the world. Like, being uneducated on something is okay. It's not unsafe. And that's, if when we don't get to that point, that's where fear is, right? I mean, I don't know. B, what are your thoughts on this? What are you, what's Mercury retrograde channeling in you right now?
You know, you guys, my palms are sweating, my heart is racing, and I'm realizing that this topic of dehumanization of really any population, but particularly in the LGBTQ community, has just been it is so upsetting, deeply upsetting to me. um for reasons that I'm still not quite sure that I understand, because I don't have a lot of, friends that identify in this community. Um but just when I see like what the rhetoric is and the vitriol, like I don't get it. Like I don't get it. We are literally like there's like there this the hate is towards like people, to me, and it could be a little bit of a shallow perspective, but what I see is like we're judging people for how they want to love or like how they want to identify. Is that like that's really what we're tripping on right now? And so it's so upsetting to me that I've had very little words for this issue, specifically to LGBTQs, Q community. And in terms of dehumanization and just hearing you guys talk, and like this headline that I read today actually is that in school, the one subject in school that kids and students are failing the most right now is history. And so we talk about, you guys name like these really um, exemplary moments in our world history of what it's been like to be dehumanized. But we're talking, and like, and you know what? Things have come up for me too, like the Chinese Exclusion Act. There was anti-Filipino legislation here in California back then, anti-miscegenation laws. Those are all dehumanizing as fuck. And I'm sorry, excuse my language. But it's just like, and so to your point, Oak, it's like, you know what? Like, just, it's like, this is like this whole thing of like plug and play. You know, today is
Yeah.
like LGBTQ. You know, tomorrow, who's it? You know, who else is it going to be? I feel bad. There was a, I think she was a representative or a congresswoman. She just gave this really passionate speech about this. She's African American, like, and I think she was. It was in one. I think it was in the state of Kentucky where they were getting ready to pass some new legislation recently. And she was like, "Who are you going to come after next?" You know, like first it was black people, it was brown people, it was immigrants. You know, like when are like now it's like, you know, the LGBTQ community. Who is next? And when are you going to fight this? Is it when they're going to come after your kids? And I was like that just really struck me. Like my throat is dry right now. Like I'm a little bit angry. um so it's just this whole thing of objectification and dehumanizing people. I'm very surprised at my very what is the word, visceral reaction
Visceral.
that I'm having in my body right now. But yeah,
So,
I'll
so
stop.
B, I wanna take that. What I just first I want to honor what you just said. Right, that's huge. When we start to realize these reactions within us, it means we're starting to connect with people,
Hmm.
and that connection is what we've been talking about. That stops dehumanization, right? So the other thing I want to say is the trauma of dehumanization is not just about the group or person who's been
Mm.
dehumanized. It touches everyone else. It touches the children who are going to learn about the history or not and repeat it. It touches their parents who are going to have to talk to their kids at some point about what they did or didn't do when these things were going on. It touches the friends of the people who, during the Holocaust, their neighbors called the Nazis on them. Their neighbors were the reason they ended up in the concentration camps, and some of the family made it out, and some of them didn't. It touches the people who were left behind,
Mhm.
the mass graves in Bosnia. The children of those people who were in those graves are still alive today, in some cases, living without them 25 years later, right? So the trauma of dehumanization hits the group and the people that it happens to, but we are forgetting and we're losing connection to the fact that it actually affects all of us because it doesn't stop with one group.
Mhm.
It's not just about the pride community. It's not just about women when it comes to women's decisions about what they do with their bodies. It's not just about um, any other group out there. It's just which group is next
Mhm.
because we're all part of a group. Every single one of us. Religious, color of skin, cultural background, whatever. We're all part of a group. So B, I just
Mm.
honor the way that you're feeling and the fact that you know this, the fact that this is coming up for you, the fact that there's a passion and a fire you're seeing in yourself. That's the antidote that I wish we all had because these topics are huge and sometimes we can't help but fall into the way we do things default in the past. But if we can remember this kinds of conversations and these reactions, maybe they carry over into the fears we have because we're not educated enough.
I love what you said, Oak, there about how this is about the LGBTQ plus community, but it's also about so much more than
Mhm.
that. And B, you alluded to that too, that idea of it's one community or it's another community, and who's the next community? Because this
Mhm.
is the pattern that keeps repeating itself. And I think about Oak, we both talked a little bit about the Holocaust and the mentality that led to that being allowed in that society. And I think of the words of Pastor Martin Niemöller, who was describing his reaction to that thought process, and it's been a very famously quoted little passage. And he said, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out
Mhm.
because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me."
Mm.
This is the road that we could be heading down. It's the road we have been down over and over again. And what can we do to stop that? Speaking out, talking about it, having these conversations, fostering communications and education.
So check our comments for links to text or phone resources or chatting resources, um, if you feel like you need some assistance, because the priority is you, our viewers, you, our listeners. These are hard conversations, but you need to be able to have them with your loved ones as well.
Thank you for joining us. No, really, thank you for listening to this difficult but necessary conversation. While we might all be different on the outside, we believe it's this uniqueness in each of us that has the power to enrich the experience of the common humanness in all of us. And as Oak mentioned, if you or a loved one needs support in navigating these difficult conversations, we've dropped some resources in the description. Please reach out. Remember, you matter. Your voice matters. And you have amazing power. Until next time.